Really excited that today on Super Bowl Sunday I don't have the afternoon mass. Now, as at St. Mark's, I always had the afternoon mass. I didn't have an associate pastor, but even when I was at another place, we had an associate. I always ended up with the afternoon mass, even when he really didn't care anything about the game. The last time the guy was at a local gym exercising, I thought, really? I'm doing the mass and you're just exercising. Well, a friend of mine always said, you just haven't figured out what it means to be the boss, have you? I guess I did. Well, of course, it's the exciting game. It's the finale of all of the football season. No football games are played after it, and the two best teams get together to compete. And while it always hasn't been a great game, actually, the last several years it really has been a really good game. But sometimes it isn't such a great game, or we don't have any great feeling for it. But I think everybody enjoys coming, participating in it, even those that aren't sports fans enjoy it, even if just to watch the commercials that also are a source of entertainment along there. So I got to thinking, what if the NFL changed its rules in a drive for equality and a drive for fairness? They decided, well, instead of having just the winning teams compete in the Super Bowl, why don't we have just a lottery system, or we just take turns to compete in this game? After all, there are some teams that have never got to compete. I actually looked this up on Google. They said only the expansion teams, the new Cleveland Browns, Jacksonville, the Houston Texans. I think Detroit is the only long-term team that didn't get to play, even though they had won some NFL championships before there was the Super Bowl. So maybe the NFL decides, well, out of a sense of fairness and equality, the dignity of people, let's just give those teams a chance to play as well. Their fans deserve it. They'd like to win too. They'd like to know the experience, and we'll just do it that way instead of our traditional way. And while it's kind of an absurd example, I think that all of us would be aghast at such a notion. How could they possibly do such a thing? If they did that, it would take away the meaning of winning. What would be the point of winning the game if achievement didn't have any kind of impact on how things were done? It would be an absurd situation that would take away the purpose of the game itself. After all, is to compete, and so that the best team can win, can be the one that participates. Well, I hope it's an absurd example to illustrate sometimes maybe the darker side of our desire for equality in society. We want things to be fair. We want to have equal results. We want to have everybody to be given the chance. Those are all good things. All of us want those sort of things in our life. We want that to be in society, and I hear more and more discussion about the problem in our own society about the lack of equality, that there are more and more people that are, especially in the economic way, super rich, having billions of dollars to their disposal, while millions of people that go without. And for me, it really should be the question, well, what about the people at the lower end? What about their needs? How can we raise up their living standards? But still, the desire for equality, based on the dignity of each person, should be something that concerns us. Yet, I think it can have a darker side where it takes away the reality that there's a tension between equality and achievement within society, or a tension between equality and, to some degree, superiority. While we are all equal in dignity, equal in rights, we don't necessarily equal in abilities. We aren't equal also in our determination. Some people just have more drive than other people. Some people seem to be more determined than others. And if we level that all out, all of those sort of things would disappear. Well, I think Jesus himself encountered some of that in his own ministry, and we heard it in the gospel today. Jesus had gone out on his tour, so to speak. He had gone around the different towns and villages that made up at least the Galilee area, and he was a great success. Everybody was excited to be around Jesus and hearing about him. And you can imagine that if there were a local newspaper when Jesus came back, "Hometown boy makes good," and that there would be a subtitle, "He will speak tonight at the synagogue." Well, the whole town showed up. Everybody wanted to be there. Everybody wanted to hear the great preacher, the great thinker, the great teacher, Jesus. And he does wow them. He does overwhelm them with what he has to say. We heard it last Sunday in the gospel, all were amazed at the gracious words that flowed from his mouth. Everybody was deeply impressed. But then the reality hit them, and they thought about fairness and equality, and somebody said, well, who do you think you are? We know who you are. Joseph is your father. He's just a carpenter. You're the carpenter's son. That doesn't make you anybody important. How can you stand up here before us telling us something, acting as if you are the wise person, or the prophet, or the great man? And it seems that everybody else joined in with them and said, yeah, who do you think you are? How dare you stand before us and tell us how we're supposed to live our life? I think there's always a great deal of social pressure on us to conform to society. Maybe that's a good thing. There's good aspects about conformity to the demands of our society, that we have to check our own personal behavior. But it can be a way to, I think, suppress differences, to suppress different ideas and different opinions, and that in some ways a person that is different is a threat to the security of the society, especially when they call for some deeper commitment. That this is a threat, that they're challenging us and saying that we aren't living up to the demands. In a certain sense, it's a threat to our egos. Nobody can be smarter, cleverer, wiser. Certainly nobody can be holier than the group. And Jesus recognizes this and says, no prophet is accepted in his native place. No prophet is accepted in his native place. If everybody is going to be equal, there really can't be any prophets. If everybody is going to be treated the same or recognized as the same, you really can't leave room for somebody not to be the same, for somebody to be above the rest. It's okay, I think, to be below. It's okay for us to look down. It's very hard for us to look up. This wasn't just a matter of social pressure that Jesus was experiencing. They were going to kill him. They intended to take him and throw him off the cliff for insulting them, for somehow attacking the dignity of their own person. They were ready to put him to death. And at heart, this is going to be, I think, the problem all along, that Jesus was acting as a prophet and calling the people to a higher standard and acting as a judge. And that they didn't want to hear, that they were not going to listen to that, and that he would eventually be put to death for it. Jesus was a threat to the status quo, to the ideal of conformity. He would die for our sins, but he would die for the sin of not being a part of the group. But of course, it wasn't to the crowd, I think, but to the rest of the leaders that Jesus was such a threat, that he was somebody that stood apart and acted as the prophet. Prophets are not part of the group. They're not part of the gang. They're not part of everybody else. The prophets are always saying that somehow the group, whether that's the civil society or the religious society, has not lived up to its demands, is not really doing God's will, and that the society is corrupt in some way. All seem to be drawn to the prophet, all want to hear him, but they, at the end, are also repelled by him. We should strive for equality in our society. It's really a good goal. It's really something that we should be concerned about because of the dignity of every person. But that dignity also demands that we recognize the prophets in our midst, recognize the call of God to live more than just the conformity to the group.